Okay, so on the first half of your test, you will have a section for converting radians and degrees. So those questions will be on your first half. Okay, so when you're doing conversions, we are understanding what is the big conversion. What do you know about radians and degrees? Remember the big one? A pi is how much in degrees? 180. Okay, 2 pi is a full circle. 2 pi is a full circle, so 1 pi is 180 degrees. Is that good? Yeah, it's called a recap. Unit 8, recap. Okay, pi is 180 degrees. So that is to be memorized. Okay, everyone's good? 1 pi is 180. 2 pi is always considered the full circle. Okay, so 5 radians equals how many degrees? And then I know that pi radians is 180 degrees. Okay, so I'm just going to set up some ratios and then we're going to do cross multiply. So times divide. Are we all okay how to do that? Times divide. So try the ratio on your calculator by doing a cross multiply. Okay, and it did ask us to draw it as well. So how do we draw an angle? So I'm going to start here. This is where I start. And I'm going to head up. Okay, how do you know where 286 degrees is? What's the top angle? How much is that? 90? 180? What's the next quadrant? 270? Okay, so something like that is showing me you're rotating, you're spinning around that much. Okay? Okay, 7 pi radians. So 7 pi equals how many degrees? When 1 pi is 180 degrees, so how much degrees is that? Times divide. Okay, I got a big number. Does that make sense? 1,260. Is that what anybody else got? Okay, how are we going to rotate that much? What do you already know? Well, that's going to like make you spin around a few times, right? Are you visualizing that? You're going to spin, spin, spin. Okay, 1 pi is there. 2 pi, right? I'm going to continue this. 3 pi, 4 pi, 5 pi, 6 pi, 7 pi. So I end up over here. And that's how many times I had to spin around and get there. Okay. Okay, so I counted with pi's. If you were doing in the degrees, you would have had to do 360, 360, 360, and figured out how many times you would have done that. Okay, draw and convert. We could draw first. That's more than 360. So I'm already going to spin a full circle. How much more do you have to go? So that means what kind of math will you do? How much further do you have to go? So a full circle plus 140 more. So that means I'm going to end up something like that. You know what 140 degrees looks like? Make sure that you are understanding that's 180, so don't go that far. Okay, 500 degrees is how many radians? And then what do you know? You know pi radians is 180 degrees, but do you see how I lined them up differently? I'm having my degrees lined up, my radians lined up. Okay, and once they're all lined up, you can figure out what to times and divide. Okay, negative 130. What do I do when I draw a negative angle? What does that mean to do? I'm going to head downward. Instead of rotating forward, I'm going to be going downward. So 130 degrees would go somewhere like that. Okay, negative 130 degrees equals how many radians? So convert. So 180 degrees would be 1 radian, 1 pi radian. And you'll put a negative on that. And I have been rounding to 2 decimal places accurately. That's the goal right now. 2 decimal places accurately. Okay. You'll have some questions about estimating how big this is. So I don't know if I put some of them as multiple choice, some not. How big is this amount of space? And you have to do it in radians. So some of you might think, well, what is that in a degree? Because your brain's probably going to visualize a degree better. How much space is that in degrees? What do you want to guess? What's a full circle? 360. So that's not a full circle. What do you think? What do you want to do? 300 and... Anybody have a good guess? What do you want to do? 330? Is that what you said? 320 I'm going to go. Okay, I'm going to do a 320. That's about, maybe. So how many radians would that be? And if you always want to think in degrees, that's fine, and then just use your conversions. So If you were just straight guessing radians, like 5.5 would be a good guess. As a radian number, are you understanding that 180 is pi? So 180 degrees is 3.14. So the whole circle is 6.28. The whole circle is 6.28. So that kind of makes you understand what that number is about. Okay, questions on your first half will be kind of like this. What's the period, the range, domain, midline, amplitude? Those kinds of questions. Okay, so let's start here. Let's label the top height. Let's label the bottom height. And what height number is in the middle? What's in the middle of those two values? Can you figure that out? So some of you might just say, I'm going to add them and then divide by 2 after. Some of you might say, hey, those are 10 apart. Figure out how to go in there. Are you getting -3? So then, what's the space between here and here? Okay, the whole thing's 10 apart to the midline. Each section is 5 apart. Okay, so let's answer some of these things quickly. The range we can do, because I have those numbers on here, the lowest to the highest. Midline, we put there, y equals -3. That's the middle. And we're always going to do it y equals, because then it's like visualizing a line going through there. Amplitude, we had labeled 5. The domain, so left to right, what do these sinusoidals do? They go and they go. Okay, period. I did not give you a very good one here. I don't see a clear top to top or bottom to bottom. Okay, we'll just try to get some values on here because they're not on the intersections. Oh, actually, if I had an imaginary line at -3, that would actually be better, but okay, we'll do this. How much space is between that? So this, I'm going to say, is -3.75. Does that make sense? Do you see how I'm lining that up on the x-axis? -3.75. What do you think this would be called then? If I'm 1.25. Okay, I'm labeling those on the x-axis. So how much space is that? How much space is there between that and that? They're 5 apart from each other, right? So my period is 5. Okay. This was kind of hard to see because -3 wasn't labeled. But do you see if I drew this imaginary line in the middle, this is a middle and this is a middle. And they are 5 apart as well, right? Which makes sense, middle to middle. Okay. Okay, determine the A, the B, and the D in the equation. You have some like this. Okay, let's label. The top is 6, the bottom is -2. What's in the middle? The top is 6 and the bottom is -2. We are at Did you think 2? So 2 is in the middle. What's the amplitude? What's the space in between that zone and that zone? There should be 4 between that and 4 between that. Okay, where do I put the amplitude of 4 into this equation? Which one? The front number, the A, the B, or the D? It goes at the front. That always tells us our amplitude. And which one tells us our midline? Midline is at the end. And for here, we need to understand this formula. Okay, so here's another thing. Am I giving that to you or memorizing it? Maybe I'll throw it on the board or something, but. Okay, what is the period? So let's go a top point to a top point and how far away those are. How many degrees is this top point actually on? Which x value is that it's on? 60? What's the x value of the next top point? Do 300? Because it's everything on that axis is going up by 60s, right? What is that space between them then? What's the period? How much space did you have to go? 240 degrees. Okay, so let's get our B value. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of doing 2 pi, that's radian talk. Obviously, this is not talking about radians. So I'm going to replace 2 pi with 360 degrees divided by something would have produced a 240. And we're just going to flip-flop those around because that's what would happen if we cross-multiplied. So that's a 1.5. Okay. Now I'm kind of working backwards. I gave you an equation and you have to get them all. So we talked about this is mid. This number we'll talk about amplitude. And this one will change the period. Okay? You have to have that memorized. Amplitude, period, midline. So y equals -4 is the midline. Okay, what is the amplitude? That's next. We'll do 10 is the amplitude. Okay, can you visualize this happening? Here's the middle. You have to go 10 lower and 10 higher then. So what is your bottom value? What's your top value? If you go 10 below, 10 above. Okay, does that make sense? I went 10 above, I added 10, and I subtracted 10. So that's going to tell me my range. Okay, period. 2 pi over b equals the period. So 2 pi over 3 equals the period. Okay, you can leave. Don't need to do anything with that. You can just leave it as is. If you had answered me as a decimal number, that would have been fine. If somebody had answered me in degrees, that would also be fine, as in 360 divided by 3 equals the period. Okay, so if you had answered me as a degree answer or a radian answer, that both would be okay. Okay, following a chart, you'll have one of these on your test. Okay, let's talk about high, middle, low. Can you give me what 21 would be? A high, a medium, or a low? That looks like a high. This looks like a middle value. Low, middle, high, middle. So what's the pattern going to be doing? High, middle, low, middle, high, middle. We're going to have to get to a low next. So my answer should be 13. Okay, so following a pattern in a chart. Okay, make an equation. Okay. Here's what I'm going to write, and you have to fill in the A, the B, and the D values. So this is considered a C value, and I will not expect you to do that because we didn't talk about it. All right, so let's talk about the top is 4, the bottom is -6. So I like to write that out on the side somewhere. So what is in the middle of those values? So -1. How much spacing is there? So 5. Okay, amplitude is 5. That goes in here somewhere. Where does it go? Amplitude of 5. You're going to write it in the front. Okay, always remembering these things. Amplitude is that. The midline is -1. So that goes at the end. And the B value is our period stuff, but we have to always do that little formula. So let's do our period here. So if I take that midline point and that midline point, okay, you can grab any points as long as they're like a top to a top, bottom to a bottom, a midline to its matching midline. I can't take that one. So this is at 3, and this is at 9. So therefore, my period is 6. Okay, 2 pi over some b value equals 6. So I'm just flip-flopping. So 2 pi over 6 equals the b. Okay, so 2 pi over 6. Obviously I didn't write that in there, but I wrote it as a reduced. I just divided by 2, divided by 2. Okay, you don't, if you would have just wrote 2 pi over 6, that's all good. Okay, sinusoidal graph has an amplitude of 9 and a midline of -2. What's the range? So this is kind of my visual. So my range is what is the lowest to what is the highest. So -11 to 7. Okay, I am just going to give you one more question here. Do you have, is your back blank or it's written on? Blank? Okay, let's flip to the back. Okay, here's a question. If I give you a min and a max, I'm going to ask you for all your stuff. Range, domain, amplitude, midline, those kinds of things. Okay, I'm a little bit of a visual person. So -3, -11. I'm not going to do anything precise, just kind of over there. And then I have a max at 5, 7. Do you understand like that would be happening? This is the lowest, and then the next time you get to a highest. Okay, so that could be a question. I'll give you a min and a max or whatever. And then what might I ask? What's in the middle? What's the amplitude? So what's in the between a 7 and a -11? 7 and negative 11. You got a number? Negative 2. How much space is there between negative 2 and 7? 9. Okay, so that's my amplitude. Okay, here's the one that tricks you. What's the period? So how much did I move from there to there? How much have I moved over? So from negative 3 to a 5, how much space is there? 8. Okay, that's not the period. Why is that not the period? Josie, you answered it. What did you say? You have to double it. Okay, this is only going halfway through a cycle, right? I would have to continue and eventually get over there. Okay, so that's why I wanted to show you that question, to understand that period, right? You haven't covered a cycle going through that.